Hi, can you tell me your name, who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, my name is Anwar Majothi, and I live in Rochdale, and I've got family that go back to Kenya.
Okay, so where was you born?
I was actually born in Rochdale.
Okay. What connections do you still have with Kenya?
Several of our big families still reside in Kenya, in Nairobi mainly, the capital, and also Narok, which is sort of 100 miles away from Nairobi. It's on the way to the Masai Mara, the world famous Masai Mara Game Reserve.
And who's still in Kenya at the moment?
On my dad's side, he's got a few sisters. Sadly, his two brothers passed away in Kenya, so we got the family from that side as well. So they mainly reside in Nairobi, and they're involved in safari, which carries on the tradition of the family in terms of taking people to Amboseli National Park or the Masai Mara, and showing tourists around. And others are involved in sort of banking and shops and businesses. And on my mom's side, my uncle is Karim, is a very successful businessman in Nairobi. He's always diversified, so whenever things have sort of changed, because initially the business was transportation, so then he moved to actually sort of mining stone from Mombasa and bringing it to Nairobi and providing it to shopping malls, for example. And he's a bit of a philanthropist as well, so he's actually given widely to charities and actually built mosques as well.
Wow, you've got quite a vast stuff of things happening in Nairobi and different parts of Kenya. Do you still have family coming from Kenya to Rochdale? Yeah,
we occasionally do. Like I say, my uncle Karim, he's got mashallah 5 daughters and 1 son, and they've been here often. If it wouldn't have been for the pandemic, they would have come as well, regularly as well. And it's just great to see them. So maybe one family comes, once a year, twice a year. You get families, and because we've got relatives scattered around the UK, places like in Scotland, or in Bath, in Bristol. A lot of my relatives that came from Uganda, they settled in Bristol, and they opened up sort of award-winning shops, kind of sweet marts, and wholesalers as well. They did really well. My uncle resided in York, sadly passed away, so that's my mum's sister resides in York. So we've got families scattered about. Asians go anywhere, don't we, really? We make a home.
Is that where your family originated from?
Looking at my skin colour, I think it's got to be India, hasn't it? I think for my clan, the Majothis, we trace back to Jodhia and other villages around the Kutch area in Gujarat. So that's where we.
When you talk about the Majothis, what can you tell us about them? And when you say clan, can you just educate us a little bit about that?
I say clan in terms of, we're originally would have been Hindus. I think a lot of people from Indo-Pakistan would have been originally Hindus. We know little, or I know little, because there's not much sort of written history about their history in India. So we may even also have some relatives that actually reside in India. So and we also know that historically there's been a lot of sort of movement of Asians and traders over 1,000 years. I think from the Indian subcontinent to parts of East Africa like Mombasa, Tanganyika, before it became later Tanzania. So my family, originally don't know a great deal about them, but we know about the original sort of pioneers that came to parts of Africa in these like wooden ships, and later in steam engine powered ships later on in the earlier part of the 20th century.
And did you ever have the opportunity to speak to any of your elders?
I came to the UK when I was 7 or 7.5, in September 1983. So I recall just vague memories of my granddad, unfortunately, on my dad's side, and he worked in the printing press, for example, and also provided vegetation, vegetables and fruits for the British Army as well. So he was quite involved in that, heavily involved with that. And he was a proud man, and he made Hajj, and we saw, as you look at the old pictures in front of me.
Can we just share some of these pictures?
Yeah, so this is my granddad I'm talking about. Bapuji, we called him. So as you can see, he's got like this film style look about him, this Humphrey Bogart, cigarette in his mouth, and he was a lovely man. He ate very little, but he was very, very particular about what he ate, and he was a very kind man. And he had, mashallah, 7 daughters and 4 sons, and unfortunately 2 have passed away. So the ones remaining is my dad lives here in Rochdale, and my uncle Hamid, who's actually written this book, and he resides in Leicester.
And some of these other photographs, what could you share with us about them?
So again, like I say, I wish I would have known a little bit more about my ancestors. And this is my paternal great granddad. Again, name wise, I'm really, really struggling. But some of the old pictures that we got from like photocopies that people have sent to us as well, and scanned copies. It's another one of my dad here with other cousins as well. That's my granddad and my dad there. And you can see from the dress sense, they're really Western, and quite a few of the Kenyan Asians would have been educated in Britain as well, so they were certainly English speaking. So again, we've got one for safari where I think this will be at the Masai Mara. So you've got the camper van there, and you've got all these uncles and aunts of mine. They would have been on my dad's side, and they would have actually camped out there, and it's quite scary to think about that you're camping in the wild. You've still got lions and leopards, and it's quite scary to think, but they were quite brave as well, so quite special times.
And there's photographs of yourself as well here?
Yeah, there's a photograph of me. This is my one of the early ones from around about in 1982. So this is one of the homes that we would have lived in Nairobi, and that's my dad, my mom, Gulzarina Abdullah Aziz, Taira, my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, and Samira, who's got 2 kids, and they now reside in Bolton. And this is a recent one of me. Well, I say recent, it's about 10 years old actually. Just in terms of just one of these lodges in Nairobi, where you can actually feed giraffes up close and personal. So it's quite special. And also this one here with cheetah. Now people think that this cheetah was sedated, but I think it was more frightened of me. But no, it's just this little sort of national park within Nairobi, and had an opportunity to again get close to the animals, and it's amazing that it's not like they're just stuck in a zoo. They've got a bit more room to sort of roam around as well.
What inspired your uncle to write the book that he wrote?
So he wrote a brief history of their journey, of the Majothi journey from India to East Africa and beyond. And I think one of my other uncles in Kenya, he used to be a teacher, and he'd written a long history, and he just wanted to preserve our history, because like other sort of cultures, perhaps they've got better, because we don't really have a written language. Kutchi doesn't, our language is a bit like Gujarati and Urdu. We don't really have a written form. I think we use Gujarati as a written form. So I think we wanted something to put pen to paper. So he was really inspired by my uncle in Kenya, and my cousin Azhar, who's the son of my uncle. He worked as a publisher in Saudi Arabia. So he was able to use his skills, and when he resettled came back to the UK, he said to Dad, "Come on now, let's write about this history that you've talked about." So if we sort of flick through, this book has got a lot of pictures of all the different families, the Majothis in Kenya, and what really kind of inspired him was just sort of connect it all up. And he shared this book with many family members, gave it to me, and it was just special that it brings it all together. It wasn't just fables, it was we actually got evidence that people did reside here. We've got old sort of certificates and IDs, and this was our history to sort of preserve as well, because it was special times again.
You was talking about that you grew up here. You were 7 years old. Is that did you say you was born in Rochdale?
Yeah, I was born in Rochdale, and then in 1976, the hot summer of 1976, and my sister was born 2 years later in York. And then my family decided to up sticks to go to Kenya. So my mom, dad, and me and my sister went to Nairobi, and that's where we settled. And dad worked out there. He worked as a mechanic and various other jobs that he did as well. And so we were there for 5 years. And my sister Samira was actually born in Nairobi. as well. So we call her the bush baby of the family. So that's what we did for 5 years. We were there, and then Dad's health unfortunately sort of started to deteriorate a little bit. He had a heart attack, and so I think my uncle Kareem and family, they sponsored, and my Dad's family sponsored for us to come back to the UK. My dad had previously lived in the UK. He was originally sent from my granddad, saved up money to get him to come to Britain in 1961, and he resided here until obviously married my mom in 1975. So that's a little bit of the history there. Like I said, we came back to the UK in 1983, so I've got some memories of Kenya.
Can you remember about Kenya?
Just going to school.
What was that like?
It was quite special as well, because it was a real mix of people. So there was the Sikhs, there was Hindus, there was people from the Aga Khan family. They were far more sort of like rich and affluent people. The Africans as well, and our sort of Kachi-speaking Majothi family members as well. And it was just happy times. What I loved was actually during school holidays is escaping to Narok. So this 100-mile trek to Narok, and the roads were dusty and awful and bumpy and a lot of potholes. We complain about potholes. You've not been to Kenya. It's improved since then, obviously, but it was just amazing. They're going to see my uncle's mansion on the hilltop. Amazing mansion. They had different all flats for different family members, and just going there and going to the village. And Narok has really developed. It's absolutely changed when I since visited. But watching films like Rambo, The First Blood, and maybe I shouldn't have been allowed to watch it, but I certainly watched it as a young child on videotape, playing with the local children there, growing up, sharing toys. It was just great fun, really. Yeah, I spoke Swahili fluently. Unfortunately, my only Swahili now is like the Lion King version of a few Hakuna Matatas here and there.
And your uncle, is he still in Narok?
My uncle is there's two uncles. One sadly just passed away not long ago, and my other uncle, he still lives in that big mansion, and it's just himself now with my auntie, and he's got 3 children. So one has actually moved to London now as well, Shazina, and she's expecting a baby. So when I visit there, I need to always try to make sure I get to Narok, and family are just so accommodating. They'll come trekking all the way from Narok. They hear that you come into Kenya, and they want to come and see you and pick you up and take you. And it's just the hospitality, isn't it, of it all as well. And that's what I sort of miss, because when you go there, they treat you to nama choma, which is like the barbecue. So, you have like goat meat, and you have also some other types of meat and, steaks. And you try like African cuisine, like ogali, which is maize meal flour, which is the African staple diet for them. But it's just nice to have that with like fish soup, for example. It's really, really fun and different, and it's really healthy, yeah.
When you came here at the age of 5,
Seven,
sorry, you probably remember a lot of these foods and the tastes of them. How did you feel when you came here and realised that the cuisine's totally different?
Totally different. It's a really good question. So when I first came, to the UK, and it was September time, so you could see out there it's a bit grey now and murky. I wouldn't eat, initially. I thought, the sun's not out, because you expect the sun to be out to be eating. It's lunchtime, but my family said no. It's lunchtime. The texture of the bread was different. It was soft. I couldn't get around the fact that fresh bread was really soft here. So, but after a while, you kind of just get used to it, don't you? So you kind of get more fattened up, I think, with certain types of food as well. Not that, I went without food in Kenya, did really. Family really treated us amazing meals there. And I think the amazing thing is that the diaspora of the Asians, when they move from one climate to another, they adapt, don't they? So although our food is Indian food, is spicy, there's a hint of like the mogo, for example, the cassava here and there. So it's peppered with cuisine influences from parts of East Africa, like Mombasa. Amazing food. I visited there, and if you've not been there, or people generally not being there, they have to go. So coming here, my mom, carried on making the biryanis. One layer of biryani took like 6-7 hours. My grandma, when she came, she actually showed my mom how to make this biryani, and it was just amazing that these rich aroma flavors, and that's what we had. That carried on, and then of course when you get older, you get influenced by bad influences like McDonald's and Milton Road's not too far from me as well, and your tastes sort of refine or change a little bit. And you try different cuisines and enjoyed it. But when I go to Kenya, I certainly feel it's a bit different because you're having more homely meals and you're not going out and eating out in certain places where the food is not great. If it's like chips and stuff like that, can't be doing you any good really.
What was school like for you when you came here?
School was difficult because I hardly spoke any English. Swahili I could speak till the cows came on, but it wasn't really going to work in school. So I was in sort of remedial classes for a while, and that carried on to secondary education as well until I was able to sort of catch up. So it was an initial bit of struggle because teachers would get frustrated with me, saying I'm not really paying attention, but I was like quite playful because the education in Kenya that I'd received wasn't perhaps the best, let's say. My parents sort of scrimped and saved because nothing was given to you on a plate, you had to pay for it. So it was a lot of catching up to do initially, and eventually I did, and did fairly okay, I think. Originally it was sort of like Calder show, and just in the primary school there was Roman Catholic, so we have to sing hymns, for example. It's really, really strange, and do the Lord's Prayer and prayers before having a sit-down meal at lunchtime. So it was just really bizarre, and I'm sure I must have just eaten some haram food as well along the way. So I have no idea what some of the stuff I ate was. It just seemed really exotic to me. So yeah.
What was it like making friendships there?
It was.
With English being a second language?
Yeah, initially it was difficult, but I think after a while you get a common language, like playing football, for example. So I played football, you made friends there, and it wasn't too bad. But I think I was one of the very few sort of Asian faces in that school, and because it was Roman Catholic, the area we lived in, as well, was round there as well, because we lived on Witchley Road in, I think, I can't remember that area, but it's near Spotland, for example. So far sort of different, and occasionally, eventually, you get invited to people's birthday parties, and I remember vividly going to one of my friends' birthday parties, and so excited to go there, and he had a big field in his garden and played football there, and the family dropped back home because my dad didn't drive a car then as well, but eventually then he got a car as well, and we had a bit more sort of independence to go places.
How did you find the move from, I know it's going back a long time and you were 7, but can you remember what it felt like when you first came to UK and you was living in a different kind of environment with the weather, the house, everything?
Yeah.
What were the feelings inside you?
It's a good question again, yeah. So coming to the UK, I don't know if you can call it depression, but it certainly felt like I was down in the mood a little bit because the weather, it was really gloomy as well, and it was a foreign climate, and just very alien to me. The image I had of the Britain was kind of sunny. We had a picture of Charles and Di on our wall in our house in Kenya. We'd seen pictures of snow, for example. And when we came for the first few months, it was difficult, but we got to know a family that kind of looked after us as well, well-known Kutchi speaking family that live in Rochdale, and we stayed with the grandma and their family for a while, 1 month, and then I think after about 6 weeks or so, my dad managed to secure a council house, and we're residing there. And the area we lived in was really rough. It was Witchley Road. It was a very sort of a rough area, but we got to know a family down the road. Typically they had a corner shop, so the Asian family, and there was a doctor's family on our street as well, eventually after initial sort of having eggs thrown at our windows and being called Paki, I just didn't know, I didn't know what was called Paki. They called me a Paki, no idea. It was just awful because you go through that, because then you kind of from an early age you realize that you're different. When you settle, you completely one of part of the fabric when you're in Kenya, but certainly, there's white people everywhere, and you're different, so you realize you're completely different. So schooling was difficult initially, but then I made friends. The area was difficult initially, but I think we kind of got to know people. My mum would cook them Indian meals. She was a tough woman. She, take curries out to them. One of the friends we know, Bernard, he was a lovely old man. He was in his probably early 50s, lived alone. And he said, whenever a call came from Kenya, tell my uncle could call him, and then he'd come over to our house, and then we'd go over to his and speak to my uncle and family back in Kenya, and that was just special and amazing. So then the winter dawned on us, and it was snowing. That made it a bit more exciting because I made a snowman because you've seen these things on TV. I watched the snowman cartoon, so we had a very basic color TV, and it was a time where we didn't really have a remote, so we had a dial on the wall, and my dad say, and maybe stand there, not for ages, but say, flick it, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV and Channel 4, and HTV we had. This was before Channel 5. So there's a very few channels as well. But again, it was like watching stuff when we come back from school, like Button Moon, for example, The Moment. So all these things, after a while, I started to, get used to a little bit. And the more you get used to something, the more the memory of the spent, childhood in Kenya kind of disappears, and you just kind of remember like your quite vivid moments. But other than that, it was then I felt more as the years have gone on, more British, I think. Yeah.
When did you last go back to Kenya?
So I went in 2018, so just a couple of years ago in October, really, 2018, and it was great because I would have liked to go to with my dad, but through ill health, again, he wasn't able to go, and he'd still like to go now, but because the pandemic is holding him back, even though he's 81, he really wants to go, and it was great. Again, I stayed with family in Nairobi, and just the development, and there's a lot of sort of segregation as well as going on, because you'd have certain areas, for example, the Hindus that moved out there, they've actually created their own kind of living quarters and shopping malls that completely cater just for their needs and requirements, and the gated community. So there's a lot of sort of security, and I understand that as well, why that happens. And my cousins live in a gated community, but Nairobi's really built up. One journey from one part of town to another could take more than 2 hours. If it's rush hour and you've had there's been a car accident somewhere. So the nightmare that trying to make your way through a roundabout is incredible. How can you actually do it? And there's no giving way from the right. It's just everyone for themselves, really, just trying to negotiate. It's amazing you're not hitting anybody. So I stayed with my cousin and my uncle Karim I spoke about earlier. He's still got a business in Nairobi, so obviously went to the business during the day, and we see the great work that they're doing, because they get these I think they've got pineapple, or these leaves that you get from certain types of trees, like palm trees, and then you put them on top of like huts for like safari places and game lodges. So my uncle's able to sort of diversify and get involved in different parts of businesses. So yeah.
Did you manage to go on a safari again this time when you went?
I did. It was the Nairobi National Park one, because when I previously went in 2010, that was a big safari I had in the Masai Mara. But this time it's a Nairobi National Park. People don't realize it's still a huge park in Nairobi. It's like, imagine, you've got all this development around this national park, and you've got animals, wild animals in the middle. And as more humans have encroached on this national park, you've actually getting sort of snakes that are going through the fencing and ending up through in people's houses, come to the toilets and all sorts of things. So it's scary because it's right on your doorstep. So the safari is great. I've got images on my phone of and my cousins are avid photographers. They're award winning, some of them, in terms of the pictures they take, and I'm on a WhatsApp group, so they're constantly always adding pictures of the Amboseli National Park and Masai Mara, and it was just great seeing the special animals like elephants and lions. Leopards are very shy, so you hardly ever get to see leopards. Cheetahs, if you can catch them, they're so fast to see. Zebras and wildebeest, you get to see more often as well. And I think there's more sort of biodiversity as you go perhaps more towards, the Serengeti, which is like Tanzania, and it crosses over into the Masai Mara. So you get to see the herd of wildebeest doing the migration because they're looking for new pastures. And that was amazing because once it was just all the traffic come to a standstill, on the dirt plains, because people have got the cameras out because they've seen that one wildebeest goes and a zebra goes crossing over, and you were there for at least 20 minutes until all these animals safely crossed over, and it's just something magical. Yeah.
Is there anything that you can share about your dad?
My dad, yeah. So my dad, he started driving from the age of 16 because he was the eldest of the four boys. So it was almost like it was his bit to sort of support the wider family. So my aunties, they did a lot of work at home. My dad really kind of sponsored my uncles and really helped them with their education. So he was driving from the age of 16 to places like Kampala in Uganda, for example, to Tanganyika, which is now Tanzania, all the way to the Belgium Congo at that time. So long distances, very, very far, and he'd sleep in the truck at times. And they did a lot of sort of transportation, so a lot of vegetables and fruit and that sort of thing, and steel and various things that cargo and transportation that he would bring over. And quite often his employers were very sort of kind and favourable, and he'd give him fruit, for example, and he'll bring the fruit back and give it to the wider community and the relatives, and it was just special time. So he worked really, really hard, and like I say, he came to Britain, and then he resided here for a while as well, and worked hard here.
What made him come to Britain?
So again, I think it was because there's a slight sort of change. There was a bit more sort of African countries a bit more independent in the 60s, and our family still kept hold of their British passports as well. So I think the view was that my dad would be coming over to the UK to work really hard, send money back, and sponsor my uncle, who later became a journalist, and Hamid Majothi, and so journalist, and he worked for airlines. So it was a lot of money that went back to Kenya to support the wider family, as people did in those days. So, and of course the British called out to the labourers from India and Pakistan and places like East Africa, and people did move here, and my dad was one of them, one of the early pioneers. 1961, lived in London for a while, settled in Wigan for many years, and then and in Rochdale as well. So Rochdale is mainly where he stayed. So he worked at Turner Brothers, for example, one of the factories in Rochdale, Croft Mill as well. And these places just don't exist anymore, do they? Just all gone now. But he grafted, he did his bit. Unfortunately, in later years, it became a bit, ill and wasn't able to work, unfortunately.
You mentioned family from Uganda, so you had family in Kenya and Uganda as well?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Yeah, so basically my auntie, my Masi, we say, my mum's sister, so she got married into a family from Uganda and Kampala, and they'll be known as cousins, of people who just decided to take a bit of a detour. Rather than go to Mombasa or Nairobi, they settled actually in Kampala, and other Majothis that we know went all the way down to South Africa as well. So there was that settlement. We had some relatives in Uganda, but like I said, the majority were in Kenya that I know of, yeah. But they were business people, 90% of the businesses in Uganda were controlled by Asians, at the time. And as we can sort of touch on later, this created a bit of resentment amongst the Africans when these countries were gaining independence in the 60s. So it was a case of, if you still got your passport, it's a British passport, why are you not committing to Africa now, And when Idi Amin, came to power in the 70s, when Milton Obote was out at a conference somewhere, he seized the country by coup and kind of sort of said infamously that, you know, you need to get rid of all the Asians need to go. So we had 28,000 British passport holders, you know, and Britain had to take them. You know, they were reluctant to. So when I did my thesis, you know, at the University of Manchester, on the settlement of Ugandan Asians, and in parts of East Africa, and the movement to Britain, there were adverts in the Uganda Argus that establishments in Britain had put, saying, we're full, we're not, please don't come to Leicester. We've got, there's no more room. But then Asians got wind of it, read these newspapers in Africa and thought, oh, there's Asians in Leicester, we'll go there. So it kind of backfired, but they became very, very successful. And I think the country, in terms of we're not here as leeches. That's the main thing. It's just, the thing is, we're hard-working people. People have grafted really, really hard to make businesses work. When Idi Amin threw people out, they barely took anything with them. Some people famously, my uncle had just £5 in his back pocket. But the entrepreneurial spirit in them to rebuild and not cry about it, not get depressed about it. So we're in this cold climate, let's just get on with it, let's muck in. And they did, and they loaned each other money, and they built up businesses. And my uncles did really well in, like I say, in Bristol, and to this day the business carries on, and they're pioneers that did that. And my uncle's Qasim, who lived in Bristol, he's got a plaque outside his shop. It's a very modest shop now. They're kind of taken over the street scene in parts of Bristol as well, so quite special.
And was that the time that your auntie came to UK as well then? Yeah,
so they would have come to the UK and would have settled in like a refugee camp. Some settled it with private homes and really, kind families that took people on board. So they stayed in refugee camp, and then they stayed Stockton-on-Forest, I think, which is just outside York. And they reside there now. So my auntie survives my uncle. So she worked at Roundtree's, the chocolate confectionery place, for many years. And I remember as a child, any sort of defective chocolate, and it wasn't really defective, couldn't really tell, Smarties in white packaging, or Lion bars, or even Roundtree's fruit pastels. We used to get all these sweets, and it's amazing. I've still got teeth. That she'd absolutely spoil us rotten. It's just amazing that she even grafted and worked hard. She could have easily stayed at home when their business started taking over. Growing, because my uncle was frying samosas, and he'd make pakoras, onion bhajis, samosas, and deliver. And I'd help my cousin. I remember early years going around, Harrogate and Pontefract, all these places around Yorkshire, to sort of service stations, wherever it might be, delivering these sort of food. And then that business then grew, and they opened up a shop and a restaurant, and they carried it on for a while. It was just amazing. And there again, once that business then ran down because my uncle passed away, the family were again entrepreneurial. They realised they got a lot of land behind the shop. Let's make it into living quarters, flats, because York University caters for a lot of people, and so basically they were able to fill it up with a lot of students as well. So again, that carries on that spirit. It's just diversify or die, isn't it? And that's what it means, that you can achieve success by not just resting on your laurels or getting depressed, but you've got to just do it. Have that can-do spirit, and people do it. Yeah.
Now, Anwar, even though you was very young when you came here, but you often get the opportunity to go back to Kenya. If you had the opportunity now, which country would you live in?
That's a really, really good question. I think I'd like to live in Kenya. I'd like to live in Kenya. I think it's just the freedom of it all, because even though it can be hard graft if you're not well to do. It can be dangerous at times, but Britain can be dangerous. Just parts of like Manchester can be so dangerous. So don't want to overplay that. But I think in terms of that work-life balance, certainly Kenya, because you've got a lot of relatives there. They're all going out there eating at people's home, each other's houses, and they like having banquets. And this is what made it more special. So when you're having a meal here, you might have like one family visit, but there they make a big scene of it. Everyone getting together, all eating together, and that's what's so special. Going on safaris together, visiting different places, and the weather, of course, and it just lifts your mood, doesn't it? That weather. So I think if I had my job as a complaints manager and went to Kenya, I think I'd be happy with that.
Thank you so much for your time, Anwar, and I wish you and your family all the very best.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.